Anyway, Dr. Lindell is an associate professor of nursing and the Mary Swain Endowed Chair in Palliative Care Health. She's a graduate of St. Francis General Hospital Professional School of Nursing with a diploma in RN and University of Pittsburgh School of Nursing, BSN, MSN, Pulmonary Specialty, and PhD. Dr. Lindell was a pulmonary clinical nurse specialist at the Penn Lung Center and participated in developing evidence-based programs to advance patients' health with lung disease. She was the executive director of the support program directing patient support and education at the University of Pittsburgh Dorothy P. and Richard P. Simmons Center for Interstitial Lung Disease at UPMC. Her research path is directed toward improving the quality of life for patients with advanced lung disease, specifically idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis and their family and caregivers. Who better to be here to talk to us and answer all our questions before we have our Happy Valentine's Day tomorrow. Following her presentation, Dr. Lindell would like for you to jot down your questions as she goes along and save them till the Q&A period after the presentation. So Dr. Lindell, thank you so much for joining us, and the program is now yours.
Well, thank you so much. I apologize. I don't know what happened, but the internet went away, and typically it's pretty good here. So hi to everyone. Thank you for sharing your Saturday with me. I'm very excited. I see some familiar faces, so hello. So we're going to get started. So I'm going to share my screen, and maybe. It's done this before. Shelley, you know what? Oh, geez.
Do you have your PowerPoint running?
I do have my PowerPoint.
Right. You're a co-host, so you should be able to click that green button.
Yeah, I know. It's, let's see, files here. Okay. This has not happened to me before, so, all right, let's just see something here.
In the meantime, while she's working, a funny story about Dr. Lindell. We were sitting by her at some program early on when my husband was first diagnosed, and she heard him kind of rattling around with his breathing, and she looked at him and said, "Where's your oxygen? Get that on right now." Don't take it off. I've loved her ever since. I mean,
yeah, she said that to me in front of my doctor, Dr. Magetto. gave me the stink eye too.
So it's not launching. If I sent it to you, Bill, or Shelley, could you launch it?
Send it to Bill.
Okay.
Bill, you're muted. Bill is muted.
A good participant. Yeah, please either text it to me.
I just send it right now. It's coming.
By text?
No, by email.
That's fine. All right.
I apologize. That's unusual because usually I can share right away.
Let's both hope that's the worst thing that ever happens in both of our lives. See here. Okay, I don't have it yet, but I'm sure it's on its way, Dr. Lynn.
I have to tell you, so I'll add a funny story. So, Zoom has definitely been challenging for a lot of people, as you see on the news. And last summer, I was invited to do a talk for the American Thoracic Society for a patient education day. And there were four of us that were speakers, and I was supposed to be the third speaker. Well, they couldn't, it wasn't on my end, it was on their end. They couldn't get me to launch. So they postponed me to the fourth speaker, and it worked out fine. But just as I'm getting ready to talk, my dog appears out of nowhere and jumps on my lap and starts looking in the screen. And
It's the best when the dogs join in.
all right, so now it's telling me it didn't send. I should have sent this ahead of time. Let's see here. I apologize. So the question that I want all of you to start thinking of as I try to get this to work is your quality of life. And so I want you, while we're trying to get this figured out, what is important to your quality of life and well-being? This is different for every single one. Some may be similar, some may be different, but I want you to think about this while I'm trying to get this to take off.
Dr. Lindell, am I muted? I think I am. Let me see. Am I muted?
No, I can hear you.
All right, thank you. I'm doing a presentation for one of the pharma companies coming up in about 2 weeks, and in preparing that, something that I'm putting in my presentation, I think so appropriate to your discussion today. And like here in Dallas right now, we are getting an unusual snowfall because we don't get snow that often. And as we're getting a snowfall, and Patty and I were looking out and thinking about the snow on the ground, and then we're watching the flakes drop down, and I'm thinking to myself, just like our patient community, like everyone looks and sees the snow on the ground, but it's really made out of snowflakes, millions of snowflakes, and each one is different from the other and the next. And I think it's the same thing that's true here in our group. We are all individuals in a different pathway at a different time in our disease progress. And we're all living with different situations in family and age, and we're all unique. So I think what you're talking about here today is just so critically important. And your slide is online. Congratulations.
Yes, I had to give myself do something with the privacy. So I'll get started. So if you take a look at this picture, this is my new workplace. I'm at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston, South Carolina. And this building on the left is the College of Nursing. So it's absolutely beautiful. I took a picture just earlier this week, and there are flowers that they look like they're poppies to me, but they're purple. There's purple ones and there's red ones. It's just so soothing to look at. So I have no disclosures. So I want to do a quick history just to tell you where I came from. I know Shelley told you some things. So I'm originally from Pittsburgh. I was born in this hospital. I went to nursing school in this hospital, and I worked there for 12 years. I was a critical care nurse working in the ICU. This year marks my 43rd year being a nurse. I can't believe it, but I was 19 when I graduated nursing school. They were 2-year programs, and I went and worked in the ICU, which we always think like, wow, they let us do that. But it was an incredible experience. I then worked in the emergency room there and taught in their school of nursing. And then I was the nurse manager of their emergency room. And in the meantime, I had gone back to Pitt and was getting my degrees. So here is a map of the Eastern Coast. So here's Pittsburgh, and I met my husband, we finished graduate school. He's from Philly. So we moved to the Philadelphia area, and we lived in Delaware and worked in Philadelphia. So I worked at the hospital of the University of Pennsylvania for the next 11 years. And I worked in the pulmonary division and was a clinical nurse specialist. So just think of when you go to see your pulmonologist in the outpatient setting, the nurse in that center, that was me. And then we moved back from Philadelphia back to Pittsburgh. My husband was recruited to Pittsburgh. So I started with these wonderful people here at the Simmons Center, and I worked there for 20 years. I started before the Simmons Center opened, and I worked there for the next 20 years. I ran the support group. I did patient education. I worked in clinic, and then I obtained my PhD in nursing at Pitt. And my research question was because of the experience that I had in clinic. And it was, I would do the histories of the patients with pulmonary fibrosis going in to see their doctor. And then I'd see them come out and I could see the blank stares on their face. And my first question was, what is the disease impact of IPF? And so that's what led me down this path. And I felt very passionate as a nurse that patients should not suffer. So we'll talk more about this as we go on. So then here's that map of the East Coast again, and here we go. We went from Pittsburgh to Charleston just in November, and here I am working at the College of Nursing, and I have an endowed chair in palliative care health. And this is a new chapter for me, but I always wanted to get back into a college of nursing. One of my jobs, in addition to working with graduate students to mentor them in palliative care health, is to actually improve palliative care scholarship for patients. And one of the very cool things is this is the first college in the United States to have a doctorate of nursing practice in palliative care. So pretty exciting for me. So our objectives for today's talk. Patients with pulmonary fibrosis experience a trajectory of increased symptoms, which leads to a decrease in quality of life. Caregivers of patients with pulmonary fibrosis experience their own burden, in addition to possibly their own illnesses. This equally leads to a decrease in quality of life. So today's focus will be on those things to improve your quality of life. So we know this is a really nice schema from the group in the Netherlands that they've come up. And in the center is quality of life, but symptoms affect quality of life. And you may have some, several, or all of these. Anxiety, shortness of breath, cough, fatigue, deconditioning, depression. These all affect your quality of life. So as I mentioned earlier, what's important to your quality of life and well-being? And that's individual, as Bill said, as a snowflake. That's personal for every single one of you. So my focus today is I want to talk about evidence-based and empiric-based. And evidence-based, and you may be familiar with this, but this is the integration of clinical expertise, patient values, and the best research of evidence into the decision-making process for patient care. Compared to empiric-based, that's based on experience, and more specifically, that therapy is begun on the basis of a clinical educated guess in the absence of complete or perfect information. It's very important that my focus today is going to be on evidence-based, but I will pull in empiric-based also. So, all right, okay. So I think the most important thing when you are diagnosed is that you have an accurate diagnosis. I maintain the database early on in my work at the Simmons Center. And we tracked how many patients we saw that came to us. And a few of the takeaways, and this has been shown in publications, is it takes many patients a few years to get an accurate diagnosis. Many patients are misdiagnosed with other lung diseases or even heart failure or heart diseases. And so that just builds into the whole anxiety and of what is it that I have. I can tell you that when back to that research question, of what is the disease impact? When I did follow-up research, some of the feedback from patients were that, okay, well, I was told that I had idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. 12-syllable word, or 3 words that are 12 syllables. But I didn't know what that was. And then I go home to my community, and my community of family and friends didn't know what it was. So I highly endorse an accurate diagnosis. Now, this next slide is, this is the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation. So in the United States, this is the medical advocacy organization for patients. Here is the website if you're not familiar. But if you take a look at the map on the left, the PFF has 68 centers. They're called, it's a care center network. So these are centers where they have to meet guidelines that have been set by people within the pulmonary fibrosis, many experts, pulmonologists, nurses, like what is the ideal care for patients. I sat on the Care Center Network selection committee for a few years. One of the major concerns was getting a care center network near where you lived. And as you can take a look at the map in Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, that's a challenge. And we know that many of those patients have to travel a distance to get care. And we understand that that can provide, cause a barrier. But the important thing that I advocate is that you be seen at a care center network or one of these centers at least once to confirm your diagnosis and make recommendations for your treatment. Now, I understand we have people from around the world on this call, and I know that in England you have the Action PF, and in Canada, I understand there are a few people from Canada. You also have a very active pulmonary fibrosis advocacy organization there. And then someone here is from Ireland, and I understand that you too. I've met the people in ILFA when we were in Dublin for a pulmonary fibrosis meeting. So the importance of participating in these groups and also the PF warriors is this: you get a confirmed diagnosis, and then you have people that provide you with medically accurate advice. And then you have a support system of other people who are going through the same system. So next on my list for your quality of life is, I think this is critical, and that's the role of caregivers. And caregivers are very important, and they often don't get the applause that they need. And so I want every one of you right now, if you're with your caregiver, to give them a smooch and say, thank you for everything that you do for me. I know I'm not always easy, but I do love you. So, and that's a little Valentine's Day prep. So I wanted to talk a little bit about caregiver burden. And caregiver burden, we're finding really truly affects quality of life. So one study done by Shaw showed they did focus groups with caregivers, and they found that caregiving for patients with ILD significantly impairs health-related quality of life, particularly emotional health. And I see some heads shaking, and you can understand that. We did some focus groups in Pittsburgh, and we separated patients, caregivers, and then caregivers of decedents, people who had IPF but had passed away. And the caregivers really provided a lot of critical information for us, and they reported overwhelming symptom burden for their loved one, particularly cough. And they had a lot of uncertainty regarding the disease. They felt comfort with the support group, especially other caregivers. And I remember once we always did a boat cruise in Pittsburgh, and I saw these two wives of patients, and they were like in a corner of the boat, and they didn't see me coming. And I came up behind them, and I'm like, what are the two of you talking about? And they like immediately were startled, and they said, oh, you don't understand like what I'm going through at home. I just need her to talk to vent to. So, caregivers, you are really critical to the quality of life of the patient. Plus, you have to also take care of your own quality of life. So I found this yesterday on Facebook and I thought this is perfect. So caregiver, someone who dedicated themselves to the care of others, a person who does big things and small things with great love, someone who does what nobody else will do in a way that nobody else can, in spite of all they go through. Nurturing, understanding, smart, and extraordinary. Someone who does more than required and cares more than they're supposed to. So for those of you who may not have a caregiver in your house, and I understand, I've seen that happen, it's critical that you work with an organization like the PF Warriors, your local support group, find a support group in your community and connect with them, because they are very important for your quality of life. So another thing that's very important for your quality of life is exercise. And one of the things we like to show this just a little funny, like these dogs are being partners and doing their exercise. So the role of pulmonary rehab is very important. So these are three studies that I'm going to reference. So Anne Holland is in Australia, and she does a lot of work on pulmonary rehab, a lot of research. And she reported in one of her studies, patients benefit from early referral to pulmonary rehab. They experienced increased endurance, less shortness of breath. Specifically, these patients, after a period of 3 months of pulmonary rehab, when they did their 6-minute walk, they could go a further distance. This Dr. Ken, he is in Germany. He reported that patients experienced significant short-term improvements in functional exercise capacity, quality of life, and the level of perceived dyspnea. And then lastly, a friend of mine who is a researcher at Vanderbilt, she researches frailty. And there is a lot of interest now that that frailty can actually be improved by participating in exercise. And I know some patients might be thinking, how in the heck can I exercise when I can hardly breathe? And if you have the ability to go to a pulmonary rehab program, I highly endorse it. If you don't, I'm sure you're familiar with this resource, but Noah Greenspan operates this pulmonary wellness boot camp. It's 6 weeks, it's online, you can do it from your home, and it's free. He asks for donations, but finances aren't a limitation. And I do know several patients that have participated in this, and they said it's made a world of difference. One of the important things about participating in exercise is it increases your endorphins, which make you happier. And another important factor is that you're with other people, whether you're doing it at home or you have the luxury of going to a pulmonary rehab facility, you're with other people. And so being with other people is really good for your head and to help you, just feel better about yourself. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is supplemental oxygen. So we know that when patients have pulmonary fibrosis, at some point during their disease course, they will need oxygen, and they're going to need it in increasing doses as their disease progresses. This is a handout from the American Thoracic Society. Was just released yesterday, but it's a third update. And I put the reference down on the bottom left corner, but I think you probably know this already, but I think it begs of just a repeat for reinforcement. So if we take a look at the picture on the right, so these are your lungs, you have a right lung and a left lung, and you have your airways, your trachea comes down to your bronchi, and they go into bronchioles as they branch out. And then you have these small alveoli. And in every human has 600 million alveoli. I might have that number wrong. You have a lot of them. I can look it up. But the key point is if you take a look at, this is a normal alveoli. So oxygen comes in, and see this little black box here? Oxygen crosses the alveolar capillary membrane, and it goes to get into the bloodstream to be carried throughout your body to oxygenate your body. So it's critical. And then carbon dioxide goes back out. So in that black box area, if you open it, this is what's called the interstitium. And see how the oxygen goes across and the carbon dioxide comes back out. That's what you breathe out. What happens is this is a normal alveoli. But if you take a look over here, this is someone who has pulmonary fibrosis. So fibrosis is scarring. And what happens at that same area where at the alveolar capillary membrane, there is scarring, and the oxygen has a hard time getting across. So if you take a look at this concept down here, see the interstitium, there's scarring within there. So the oxygen has a hard time getting into the bloodstream. And I'd like to describe, and many of you probably have experienced this, it's like hitting a wall. So patients, and think about this in your own personal life. How many of you have said, you know, as long as I'm sitting, I'm fine. But when I go to move, I get short of breath. And what's happening is when you're sitting, the oxygen is, you know, like earlier in the disease, it's able to get across. But when you go to move and exert yourself, it's hitting a wall. So then what happens is your disease progresses. You need more oxygen to flood across there. So the next slide. Now, recently, the American Thoracic Society released these oxygen guidelines just in November. And I was one of the, on the working group. And it's specifically for patients with emphysema, COPD, but also for patients with interstitial lung disease. And these were the recommendations. So I'll walk through these. So for adults with interstitial lung disease, that's pulmonary fibrosis, who have severe chronic resting room air hypoxemia. What that means is that when you're sitting and you're resting, your oxygen saturation is below 89%. And so the recommendation is that you are prescribed long-term oxygen therapy at least 15 hours per day. So what happens is when you think about this, if you're sitting there and you're not exerting yourself, but your oxygen levels are below 89%, you need oxygen to help your body work. And what happens when you don't have the right amount of oxygen? That's not something you can cheat on. Patients have said, well, I don't want to use it because I want to get addicted. One of our doctors, Kevin Gibson, said, well, let's just cut to the chase. You were addicted the minute you took your first breath. Oxygen is not a medicine or a therapy that if you use it, you're going to need more and more and more, or if you don't use it, it's something that's vital for every single human being, is that we breathe oxygen in, it makes our body work, and we breathe out carbon dioxide. So it's very important that if you require oxygen, that you use it. And we're going to talk a little more detail. Now, for adults with interstitial lung disease who have severe exertional room air hypoxemia. So what does that mean? That when you start to move and you, whatever your level of exertion is, so you move, you're walking or you're going to do exercise at pulmonary rehab, if your oxygen level goes below 89%, they suggest using oxygen when you ambulate, meaning that you use it when you walk. Now, this also translates into when you're bathing. You should, if you need oxygen when you're with exertion, you also need oxygen with bathing. And patients on many occasions have said to me, but I didn't think I could get it wet. You can absolutely get the tubing wet. There is one caveat, which I'll go into in a minute, but you can put your system outside of the shower or the tub. You should have a shower chair to sit on. And I always say to patients, do the experiment. You know how you feel if you're not using oxygen and you come out and it takes a while to get your energy back. Put a chair in the shower and sit on that chair and use your oxygen. And what happens, you'll see if that makes a difference for you. And I label this under the idea of save your energy for the good stuff. Like don't force yourself to have symptoms. Save your energy for the things that you want to do. Like maybe you want to go out to the store. Maybe you want to go out to dinner. Maybe you want to go to your families. Well, make sure that you're taking good care of yourself during these times. Now, the third and the caveat that I wanted to mention, the only tubing that you can't get wet is the high flow oxygen that are like the nasal pillows or the pendants, because that then if they get wet, they don't work properly. So then you would just use, some people will put a couple cannulas in just to get the oxygen to get them through bathing. So liquid oxygen recommendation, and I know everybody's having problems getting oxygen, let alone liquid oxygen, but we purposely made this recommendation in patients with chronic lung disease who are mobile outside of the home and require continuous oxygen flow rates of greater than 3 liters a minute during exertion. We suggest prescribing portable liquid oxygen. And I do know we're actually tracking at ATS and at the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation, patients are reporting that they're having trouble just getting oxygen. The demand has been increased because of COVID and patients going home and requiring supplemental oxygen. But it's not always going to be like this. It should get better again. So these are some suggestions. So it's important to maintain your oxygen saturation at 89% at all times. And this includes with rest, with exertion, with exercise, such as pulmonary rehab or walking around the block, and sleep. And so use of a pulse oximeter helps to monitor your oxygen saturation. So if you take a look at these oxygen oximeters that I placed here, all I did was a simple Google search. You can search Google if you don't have one. There's not one that we specifically endorse that's better than the other. I do know there's some new technology, and some people have Apple Watches that are recording their oxygen saturation. I'm not as familiar with that. If somebody is, that's great, and to please share that information later. So the reason oxygen is so important is that oxygen helps you to become mobile. It helps you to mentate clearly, and it helps your quality of life. So it falls in the realm of quality of life. Now, the other thing that's really important is nutrition and diet. And this is often missed in pulmonary fibrosis. We're starting to see more of an emphasis of this. Some pulmonary rehab programs do cover nutrition, but nutrition is really very important. So I like to put this little cartoon in here. This little baby maybe had one or two too many biscuits or ice cream or whatever the treat of choice is. So here's this is a review done on nutrition in patients with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. And this is out of Switzerland, and they reviewed scientific literature published between 1995 and August of 2019. This was just released last year. And this is one of the first groups. This is one of those, well, yeah, we know this, but it's not been published. So this is one of the first groups that comes out and endorses that nutritional status affects clinical outcomes. For instance, lower body mass index and body weight loss have been associated with increased mortality, meaning that people that aren't getting enough calories and they have weight loss, it's kind of becomes a vicious cycle. Conversely, the effects of obesity and metabolic syndrome. So for those people that have a high BMI, that too can affect your, your outcomes. So if this is something that you get on the scale and you realize your doctors talk to you, or maybe they don't talk to you, ask them the question like, how is my body mass index? And do I have to worry about anything? It's not, I will endorse that it's good if you're able to have the resource to see a nutritionist, to please do that. Now, in lieu of, I understand in the current times, we're trying to advise everybody to stay home. So I actually want to show this, and then I have another slide. So this same group, what they did, and let's walk through this. There's several things that affect your nutrition. So let's start up at the top. So here is the restrictive pattern. So pulmonary fibrosis is a restrictive lung disease. Simply put, what that means is that it's like a vice around your chest. So the disease, as we talked about earlier, is in that alveolar capillary membrane area. It's not within the airways themselves. It's in the tissue surrounding the airways. So what happens, and you'll see many of these they all interrelate. So this causes a load on your respiratory muscles, which leads to dyspnea or shortness of breath. What happens is then the cycle starts. You have reduced physical activity, you become more sedentary, and what happens is your muscles start to decondition and you become more short of breath. So this is a vicious cycle that starts to happen. Now, there are other things that can add to your nutrition. So now with antifibrotic treatments, what we know is that patients sometimes experience an inappropriate diet because they may experience GI or gastrointestinal symptoms of, they might have diarrhea, they might have GI upset, heartburn. So that what happens is then that leads to a reduction of muscle mass. Coming back over here, normal aging, that leads to a vitamin D deficiency and leads to a reduction of muscle mass. Smoking, which is not usual in this group, but smoking can also lead to a vitamin D deficiency and lead to an inappropriate diet. And sometimes patients experience what are called acute exacerbations, meaning that their disease worsens rapidly. And so what happens is they may have an inappropriate diet. As a result of that, they have systemic inflammation, meaning that there's swelling going on within their tissues in their body, which leads to this hypercatabolic state. And what that means is that their metabolic demand has increased. But all of this leads to reduction of muscle mass. So nutrition is very important and is something that we should pay more attention to, and it does affect quality of life. Now, this is a resource. So if you don't have the good fortune of being able to see a nutritionist, this is by the NIH. This is paid by your tax dollars. So the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the National Heart, Lung, Blood Institute of the NIH. So they have health information, and this is just like a screenshot of their front of their web page, and it's aimed for a healthy weight. So it talks about assessing your weight and your health risks, controlling your weight, eating right, and they give tips to help. And then a healthy eating plan, and this is for everyone. It gives your body the nutrients it needs every day while staying within your daily calorie goal for weight loss, but also for those patients that need to put weight on. So it emphasizes vegetables, fruits, whole grains, fat-free, low dairy products. It includes lean meats, poultry, fish, beans, eggs, nuts, limited saturated and trans fats, sodium and added sugars, and then, of course, controlling portion sizes. And if you're not familiar, you can go to this link. It's called My Pyramid. You can actually build your plate, and it shows you what your nutrition looks like. So again, highly endorsing that nutrition is an important part of your quality of life. So palliative care, this is where I have kind of gravitated to as a result of my work with patients with pulmonary fibrosis. And this slide here shows, this is from the Center to Advance Palliative Care. This is out of Mount Sinai in New York City. And they advocate that palliative care is appropriate at any point in a serious illness. And I have to emphasize, pulmonary fibrosis is a serious illness. So if we walk through this, so when someone is diagnosed with a serious illness, such as pulmonary fibrosis, you of course will have your disease-directed therapies. You know, these could include antifibrotics. This can include pulmonary rehab, checking to see your oxygen. And it's as you go along the disease course. But palliative care has a role alongside this. And palliative care is simply, it's symptom management and addressing advanced care planning. And symptom management. So let's stop and think about it. Back in one of those original slides, we know that patients might have cough. We might know that patients have shortness of breath, and it may worsen as their disease goes on. They may be fatigued. They may be anxious. They may be scared out of their mind. Well, palliative care can help with this because there are medicines and not just, pharmacologic therapies, but there's also non-pharmacologic therapies that can help you with this. And it's from diagnosis throughout the disease course. Now, I know the question always comes up is that, but I don't want my doctor to give up on me. I don't want to go into hospice. Palliative care is not hospice. Hospice is a specific Medicare benefit for patients that are thought to have less than 6 months less to live. Palliative care is, as this says, is appropriate anytime in the illness. I want to show this slide because I want to emphasize palliative care has different names. It could be palliative care, it could be supportive care, it could be called quality of life care. Our goal is to help you achieve your best quality of life. And there is this website, and this is important. I tried playing with this to see if we could do it real time, but it wouldn't let me do it. But this is one of those websites that you want to make sure you have access to. So the link is getpalliativecare.org. So this is providers across the United States. And what you do is you enter your address here, as it says, enter address, zip code, or city and state, and then check which one applies. Do you want hospital-based or nursing home, office? So if you want ambulatory palliative care or home. And when you put that in, you search. And I like to tell this quick story. Someone reached out to me. They had a patient who said, I can't get palliative care. There's none where I live. And that's what they were told by their physician. And their advocates reached out to me and said, is that true? And I said, well, let's try this tool. And we plugged in the woman's zip code, and she lived in Louisiana. And it came up with 6 palliative care centers within a 30-mile range. So this is one of these really important websites. So research can also help your quality of life. So participating in research, there are different ways. So there's research studies that they might be a registry where it allows the researchers to keep your medical information, your blood. They might test your blood, and it's to better understand the disease. And then there's clinical trials, which are often led by pharma companies as a way to test new therapies. Each study has criteria or requirements that patients must meet to participate. The goal of participation in research is to find better ways to understand and manage the disease. And I want to give you 2 tips here. I didn't write them down, but in my dissertation study, we talked about research. And this was, now granted, this was 2006, so 14, 15 years ago. And the patients who participated in this disease management course that I led, unanimously, they said, I understand that the research may not help me, but it might help those after me. And they felt that it was very important to be altruistic and help other people in the disease. A resource to find if there's, studies that maybe you might apply or, might be applicable for you. It's called clinicaltrials.gov. And so clinical trials, all one word, .gov. And you can go in there and search to see for research studies that may be applicable to you. So vaccines. So vaccines also promote quality of life. So if we take a look at this website, and I'm going to apologize up front, I tried to get this picture on the left to be bigger and it just gets blurry. I couldn't get one. But if you go to the bottom, this is the website is the cdc.gov vaccines and schedules. You can see what the vaccines are recommended. So the key takeaway regarding any vaccine. So first of all, for every single one of us, as we age, our immunity decreases. And that it just makes us more prone to get diseases. So it's important to get an annual flu vaccine. They call it the DPT, the tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis. That's recommended that you get every 10 years. And pertussis is whooping cough. And I'm not sure if there was an ad campaign that was actually, very well done where they had grandma and grandma wanted to see her grandkids, but grandma had whooping cough and she was like the big bad wolf when she coughed. And so what does grandma want to do? Grandma wants to see her grandkids. So the recommendation is that you get your DPT every 10 years. Now, another vaccine is chickenpox, the varicella vaccine. Now it's Shingrix. And I can tell you that the recommendations for that have changed in the past few years. It used to be once you were 60. Now it's once you're 50. And it's a sequence of 2 injections. You get one, and then 2 months later, you get the second one. I got mine like in 2019 in October and then again in December. And the second one, first of all, my arm hurt like more so like a tetanus shot. But I had maybe just some mild fatigue for the weekend after I got it, but then I was fine after that. The other vaccines that are very important, and you need to talk to your doctors about this, are the pneumonia vaccines. So there's 2 pneumonia vaccines. One is the pneumococcal vaccine. It has 23 valents. The other is the pneumococcal, and it has 13 valents. So let me break that down and tell you what that means. So community-acquired pneumonia is you go out, you go to the mall, and this is before COVID, before masks. So you're exposed to someone in the community that has pneumonia. Well, these vaccines, they recommend that you get both of them, and there's a time period. And I can tell you, I've worked with many pulmonologists, and they get it backwards. So it's mostly important you talk to your PCP or your pulmonologist about the order in which you get these, but it's very important that you get them. And what the instructions are, it doesn't cover every single community-acquired pneumonia, but it covers the majority of them, and it just decreases your risk of getting pneumonia. And if you have pulmonary fibrosis and you get pneumonia, it doesn't bode well for you. So now the COVID-19 vaccine, and I know that Bill did a survey at the beginning. So this website is from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And if you go down to the bottom left, there's the link and to get to the recommendations. So the vaccines, they have it broken down by links, healthcare personnel, long-term care facility residents, essential workers, and then underlying medical conditions. I apologize. I couldn't get this to be bigger. So that's why I think it's important that you go to their website and you get this information. But patients who have underlying medical conditions, you are already at risk for to have a weakened immune system. And remember I said, as we all age, our immunity decreases. And if you have a disease that you have pulmonary fibrosis or something where your lungs architecture is not normal, you may also be on medicines. There are some medicines, immunosuppressants that suppress your immune status. That could be patients that have pulmonary fibrosis that is not idiopathic, or patients who are post-transplant. So you have a weakened immune system. So if you got COVID, the disease, it just wouldn't be well. So the recommendation is that you do get vaccinated for this. And this is my card. And I was in a meeting yesterday and they said, this has been such a challenging year for everyone. And you think about your own self, you've been socially isolated. You've done everything you're supposed to do. You want to just get out and about. You want to go to the mall. You want to go to do indoor dining. You want to travel. You maybe want to go see your grandkids. You want to have your grandkids. The best way for us to describe this, getting your vaccination is your ticket to ride. And that, not immediately, you don't get on in the car or on the train right away. For the time being, we're still going to have to wear mask and just still do the precautions for a little more. But once we get what's called herd immunity, so 70 to 80% of the people that have the vaccine, then what's going to happen is you're going to see that we're going to come to the end of this. There is hope. There is light at the end of the tunnel. And I just loved when this person said to me, this is your ticket to ride. And when I got my vaccine, at MUSC, they actually recommended, they said, put it in your passport. And I in this meeting I was in yesterday, they said that what we're going to see happen in the future is that if you want to get on a plane, if you want to get on a cruise ship, you're going to have to prove that you have a vaccination, because it's just too much risk for the companies if you don't. And then in addition, what happens is that there's one more part to that. I was just thinking I lost. For meetings, for professional meetings, they're going to start to require that people, if you want to attend, you're vaccinated. So mask, I can't say enough about masks. So masks are critical. And I know the CDC recommendations seem to keep changing, but that's because the disease keeps changing and we don't know. But we do know things that we know. So the recommendation as of this week is that if you have to go out and about, that you wear 2 masks, and it reduces the exposure to the virus by 95%. So I had to include this picture here to the right. It's very challenging to me when I go out and I see people have their mask on, but they're not wearing it correctly. It doesn't help them and it doesn't help me. And so some recommendations are, if you take a look at the picture on the left with the 2 masks, you can take and make a loop with the sides, and so that it's a tighter fit around. Another recommendation is you can wear one of these, surgical masks, and then put a cloth mask over it. And that will help to reduce your exposure. And then it's just really important that you cover your nose and you cover your chin so that, it just prevents if you had virus or some illness, that you're not giving it to people, but also more importantly, you're not getting it from someone else. And I know that we've had patients approach us and say, but I can't breathe with the mask on. And the American Thoracic Society came out in the fall and made a recommendation that it's critical, and that just because you have a lung disease isn't your get out of jail card free, your free card. It protects you, and you don't want to be out without a mask. It's just, and you want to wear your mask properly. So this recommendation is this week too from the CDC. The CDC, I have to tell you, like Rochelle Walensky, who is an ID infectious disease doctor at Harvard, is just absolutely brilliant, thoughtful. She's the new director of the CDC. And their advice, they're just like doubling down and making sure that the advice that's coming out is based on science. And so this tweet that was this week said the rates of COVID remain high across the nation. The average number of daily cases in the last 7 days is 42 for every 100,000 people. So help slow the spread. Wear a mask, stay 6 feet apart, avoid crowds, wash your hands. And if you want more information, you can go to their website. But these are simple things to help us get to the other side of this. And there, as I said, we're getting there. So pulling this together, and I've provided you with a lot of details, non-pharmacologic therapies that can help to improve your quality of life. So I'm just circling back, what is important to your quality of life and well-being? And then resources. You have the resources of the PFF, the PF Warriors. But I also want to show you, this is new, not a new resource, just a newly named resource. So the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation has this help center. And this is the number. It's manned Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and it's sound medical advice. And for the people from the other countries, I know that you get that from your advocacy organizations because I follow them on social media. So you can call and ask. You don't have to be their patient. You don't have to be a patient. You could be a caregiver. So this is just a resource that's really important that you be aware of and take care of. And then lastly, this is my view in my new abode. And this is how I like to see this is like really important for my quality of life. So with that, I have done all my, presented all my slides, and I open it up to you.
That was wonderful, Dr. Lindell. And I have a question real quick. You mentioned exercise can improve frailty, and I've heard that term a lot, but exactly what is frailty? How would I recognize that?
So frailty is, the picture that comes to mind. Think of somebody who is just really kind of like hunched over, not able to do as much as they did before. And we did a quick study last year at Pitt where we took a look because frailty is now starting to be better appreciated. And so people, they'll measure frailty for surgeries. They'll measure it for lung transplant. There's some simple tests that they can do to check frailty. People who are less frail do better. People who are more frail don't do as well. So, and they're now starting to see that exercise can help frailty. And this study that we did at Pitt, we took a look at patients who participated in pulmonary rehab, who had pulmonary fibrosis. And they participated in 3 months of pulmonary rehab. And there was a test that they did. It's called the TUG test. It's the timed up and go. So what happens is you're sitting in a chair as the patient, and the therapist says to you, okay, stand up and go. Now, everyone think about that. How long does it take you to get up and go? So it's different for everyone, but what they find is exercise can help to improve that. And something that can affect frailty and cause you to be more frail, and people who are on prednisone or steroids, that can cause a lot of muscle atrophy or muscle breakdown. And what happens is it doesn't make you as strong as you should be. And I don't know if anyone would know this physician. Dr. Dauber was, when I first came to the Simmons Center, he was our medical director. And when I would go in the room with him, somebody who was on prednisone or steroids for any length of time, the very first thing he would ask them to do is to stand up from a chair and to see. And that was just a quick measure of like how frail this person was or wasn't.
Dr. Lindell, we've had some questions that come in, but one of the points I want to make sure that we remind everybody of is that a benefit, and there's many, many benefits of becoming a PF warrior. One of them is the course, the Pulmonary Wellness course offered by Dr. Greenspan at the Pulmonary Wellness Center is an automatic benefit of membership. And there is no cost to PF warriors to attend that. So that's one of our many, many benefits, plus our literature, our library, and our private website. The books we publish, we have a book, Dr. Lindell, I'm not sure if you've seen it. It's called the PF Warrior Patient Guide, and it's a booklet put together by members for members, answering many of the daily and day in and out questions that we need. We also have a full-time mentor support, like instead of calling a phone number, when you join the PF Warriors, you get an email welcome letter, including a separate letter from our mentor currently, who is Mike Daly. Mike today is over in Houston, undergoing workup on a kidney transplant, but otherwise he'd be here. So we have a mentor program in place, which is a benefit of membership. We have a book that's a great guide, just highly, highly recommended. And then, of course, we offer Dr. Noah Greenspan's Pulmonary Wellness course in BOOTCAMP. And we have other things that are exciting coming down the pike we'll hear more and more about. But I just had to mention that because it's something that I think some of the people in this call have not registered for membership. And it's so simple. You simply go to pfwarriors.com, you click on the Join Us, you put in your name and your zip code, and bingo, all these wonderful benefits will come to you. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I thought it was important.
No, it's really important. I think that the better educated you are, the more prepared you are for this.
And then Renee, you had a question, and you sent me as a text message, and Renee's question is there an age after which you do not recommend getting a lung transplant?
So I came from Pitt, and Pitt is one of the largest lung transplant centers. And I have to, and I was at Penn, and Penn also was a lung transplant center. So it depends on who the director is of the transplant center. And the reason I'm going to go into this, there are some centers that are strict, and it's an actual age, and you can't get transplanted. And then there are some centers where they're a little more aggressive, and it's a physiologic age. So what that means is that you've seen people, well, I'm going to use Bill as an example. So Bill, I know you've told me your age before. Now, most people wouldn't think you're that age because you are very fit. So physiologic age doesn't always equal your actual age for people who are really in good shape. Let's contrast that. Say that you have someone that is in the age range where you could get a lung transplant, but they're not in good shape. They're overweight, they have diabetes, they may have other diseases, heart disease. And so it's not so much that the centers don't always go with an exact age. They go with what shape you're in. And it's a pretty rigorous workup. So I always tell people, I'm a big proponent of lung transplant transplant. And that's because when I saw patients who lung transplant has made a difference. There are also patients it doesn't work, but I like to give the examples. Many of you know Charlotte Saunders. Charlotte Saunders is 16 years post-lung transplant. When I came to Pitt, our oldest patient our longest surviving transplant patient, let me say it, was 17 years post-transplant. And I saw him like right before I left, and he said to me, lungs are great. Everything else is falling apart, but my lungs are great. I can breathe. So, it's an individual decision, but if it's something that's in your path, you don't want to wait until it's too late. And it's good to be evaluated early and be told, you know what, you're too well, versus wait too long and then you miss the cutoff. And it's not, the other thing about lung transplant, it is not like you're going to have a doctor's appointment, like you're going to see a new doctor. And, you go in for an hour, see the doctor and leave. Lung transplant is an evaluation, is a series of hoops that I like to refer to. The very first hoop is that they will check your finances to see will your insurance product cover a transplant? So that's the very first hoop. And that takes sometimes up to 6 weeks for that to occur. It can occur quicker. Then the next hoop is you're invited to come for the evaluation. The evaluation is a week long, typically. It's 3 to 5 days. And that's appointments from 8 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, and multiple tests, like you're going to have repeat breathing studies. You're going to have a 6-minute walk. You're going to have a DEXA scan to see what shape your bones are in. You're going to have a nuclear medicine scan to see what shape your lungs are in. You're going to have a CT scan. You're going to see you're going to meet with the nurse. You're going to go through education. You are going to meet with the surgeon and see if you're a good candidate. You're going to meet with a psychologist and to see, do you have a caregiver? Or are you able, do you have the sensibility? I don't know that sensibility is the right word, but are you able to, you're trading one illness for another illness, but are you able to continue to survive? You'll meet a social worker to see what resources, because what happens is when you after a lung transplant, a successful lung transplant, you're going to be on what are called immunosuppressants for the rest of your life. And I like to give the example of 2 patients when I was at Pitt. There was a patient, he was 82, and he was in great physical shape. He had a lung transplant and he lived 3 more years. Now, that almost seems like 80 years old. Why would they do that? That was like in the early 2000s. They did it. It worked. We had another woman. She had her transplant and she died within a year. And like a week or 2 before she died, we found out she stopped taking all her immunosuppressants because she felt so good. Mm-hmm. And she went into, she rejected acute rejection of her transplant. So, it's really up to you as an individual, but if it's something that I see a question here, rejected because of kidney function. I don't know those details. Sometimes those details are transplant center dependent, and we'll advise that get another evaluation at another center. You won't have to have all this test again. That you can share your test, but they can take a look at it, and they might have, different requirements. I see Jim Carnes on here. So Jim Carnes, I know from the Pennsylvania IPF registry. Jim Carnes, how many years are you post lung transplant? 7. So I met Jim Carnes. We used to have Pennsylvania IPF registry. We would have these education events across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And I remember Jim Carnes from Hershey. And were you sold on getting a transplant at the very beginning of your lung disease?
Not at first. I
Yeah.
thought I was too old and it wasn't quite meant for me. But I changed and I looked at one hand, I know I'm going to die, and the other hand, I know I'm going to have a chance to live. And I chose the hand that I had the chance to live. And so far, I'm working on 8 years.
Yeah. So it's I'm sorry to point to you, but I knew that you would provide the answer that I was hoping would be helpful for people.
I would do it again too.
And so Jim he had his transplant at Temple. Temple is very aggressive. And they, it's one of those, some centers don't have all the resources. But some centers like Temple, Pitt, Cleveland Clinic, by no means endorsing any of these, just saying the ones that in my experience, but that have a lot of resources. So a lot more experience. I'm looking to see. All right, I'm going down through your questions. Air hunger. Why does this happen? Kat. Where's Kat? Kat, are you able to, can you write any more or describe what your air hunger is?
I can explain it to you if you can hear me.
That's perfect. Yes, I can hear you.
It's a new thing for me. I'm not on oxygen when I'm at rest. So usually it's happening when I'm just kind of at rest. And it's kind of a new thing for me. And all of a sudden it's like I can't get enough breath. And it has been waking me up a little bit at night too when I'm sleeping. And I sleep with oxygen.
Okay. Do you have a pulse oximeter?
I do, yeah.
Do you check your saturation at the time you're having air hunger?
I do. I think it's fine. And then I have actually gotten this new ring thing that I've been wearing at night on my thumb. And I've been noticing sometimes I have really low blood heart rate, like below 50.
So have you talked to your doctor?
I didn't want to make a big deal about it if it's just kind of a normal thing. So I haven't.
So you need to talk to your doctor. I'm not saying it's normal or not normal, but don't minimize it.
Okay.
You want the doctor saying to you, no big deal. Not you saying no big deal.
Okay. And is it just that I'm breathing fine. I feel like I'm getting enough oxygen.
There can be several factors that, are leading to this. That's why it's safe to seek medical advice, just to have it worked up and see what's going on.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Good luck. James Sue, how much exercise is good per day? Should we keep working or stay home to reduce the load in life? Thank you. All right. So how much exercise is good per day? There's recommendations that are saying that 30 minutes of exercise 5 times a week is the recommendation. Now, I don't know if that's too much or too little for you. If you are able to exercise, which again, remember I promoted exercise, we want to make sure you're doing it safely and you're checking your oxygen saturation to make sure that your oxygen level is above 89% at all time. If it's below 89%, we don't endorse pushing yourself and letting it drop, because what happens is that puts a strain on your heart. So you can do safe exercise with your just making sure that you're above 89% at all times. That's the easiest answer to that. Now, should you keep working or stay home to reduce the workload? That's a personal question that only you can answer. If you derive joy from work, you do what you need to do to keep yourself and your mind active. If you think, I don't have to work anymore, I could stay at home. The only thing is we advocate is if you're going to take that route, don't stay home and become a slug, Okay, Nancy, oh gosh. After 11 months of being careful, my husband got a haircut and contracted COVID 3 days later. I got it 3 days after that. He had the BAM antibody treatment. We are on day 20 and day 17 and feeling okay now. How long should we wait to get the vaccine? Well, you want to confirm this with your doctor, but I was what I've been reading this week, they're saying 3 months after you're, cured from, your COVID is over. Okay,
Question.
when exercise, I'm sorry, somebody had a question?
Well, that's me, Nancy. Also, I've been getting mixed messages on whether to get retested or not, and we're just afraid to have our adult kids back over. I feel like I've got cooties. I've tried to air out the house. I don't.
It's an airborne disease, so that's good. Where do you live?
In Richardson, Texas.
Do you have a county health department? Yeah, if you haven't reached out to them, I would reach out to them. The other is the CDC, reaching out to the CDC.
Right. My primary care has been great. We both tested positive through Baylor Scott White through their drive-through parking lot, and that's how we discovered everything. But and the BAM treatment helped my husband a lot. He had about 8 days of really miserable, and he's the one that has the symptoms of PF. So yeah.
For everyone else here that doesn't know, can you tell them what BAM treatment is?
It's a long word, and I don't know that I can pronounce it, but it's a 3-hour antibody infusion. There were 2 different kinds. He went at 7:30 in the morning to Baylor Scott White emergency department, and there was just rows of people that were getting it. I don't think I can pronounce the words BAMLANDIN or something like that. He had to sign off that he was taking one of 2 treatments, and they said the pharmacist there at the hospital would decide which one to get. But it took about 2 days and he was over. His felt like a severe flu. Mine felt like sinus infection and my teeth hurt. It's just the weirdest disease. So
yeah, people have had different. I have a son-in-law who had a terrible headache and then for 10 days was foggy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's different for everyone. What did your doctor say about getting retested?
He said we might show positive for 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. But then you read and they say, well, after 14 days, if you haven't had a fever, then you can be around people. But I just don't want to take a chance. I feel like I've got the scarlet C on my forehead now.
Yeah, it's oh man, it's just such a challenging. What the CDC this week, again, and as I said through the thing, as we learn more, there were so many unknowns, but this week, what they're recommending is that after, I think it's even down to 7 days, but say 14 days to be safe. You're not contagious, but just wear a mask. Mask work. So wear a mask, and if you're in Texas, maybe after this weather breaks, and it's nice, do something outside. It's good for your mental health.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Sure. Oh man. Okay. So Renee, when exercising, sometimes my heart oxygen saturation is fine, says 79%, but my heart rate is way up. So Renee, what do you define as way up?
I would say 115.
Oh, okay. That's not too bad.
Really?
No.
I'm 78. But do
It's
you
okay.
use 220 minus age?
Pardon?
Do you use the equation 220 minus the age?
Yeah. Yeah, but your saturation's important. Now, have you ever been diagnosed with any heart disease?
I have 2 stents.
And do you take medicines for your heart?
Yes, I take statin.
Yeah. That's something, you know, again, medical advice, you run it by your doctor, but the exercise is what's important. And it's good that your saturation is that high.
Yeah, my oxygen machine puts 10 liters per minute into my nose. So that's very high too.
Good, good, good. Well, okay, important thing that you just brought up. Do you use any kind of humidity with that oxygen?
Yeah, oxygen goes through a little bottle of water, yes.
Okay, good. So for those who use oxygen above 4 liters, you should have some humidity added to your concentrator at home, because oxygen is very drying and it can dry out your nose. It can impact your ears. So it's good to have your oxygen humidified. If it isn't, talk to your DME company. They have the equipment. They should actually know to do that. The other thing is normal saline spray, a product like Air, AYR, another product, KY jelly, just it's water soluble. You want to keep the inside of your nostrils lubricated because it can be very drying and can cause nosebleeds. There was something else with that I wanted to say with the oxygen. So your ears, if your ears are getting sore, people, sometimes actually get like scabs on their ears. I always say, take your oxygen cannula and put it up here like a party hat and take the pressure off your ears. So that's just a good tip. All right. George, have you come across bleomycin-induced PF? So George, where are you? Is George here?
I'm here. I'm
Okay.
here. I'm talking from the empty chair.
Okay. So George, did you have a previous diagnosis of cancer?
Yes, I did. And I received chemotherapy last year.
Okay. So there are lung scarring, pulmonary fibrosis that can occur from chemo, radiation. There's certain medicines, amiodarone, that can cause pulmonary fibrosis. The idea is that the damage has occurred. If you think back to that slide that I showed with the alveoli, there's scarring there. They're not sure, will that scarring advance? It may not, but the important thing is that you still, do all of these things that I recommended to make sure that you're taking care of yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, yes. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, regarding the rejection due to kidney function, this happens because during the first year post-transplant, the kidneys take a huge hit. So at Pitt, we had a lot of our patients who had lung transplants, exactly this, then went on to have kidney transplants. It is to do with the meds. It doesn't happen to everyone. Okay, you talked about the importance of a proper diagnosis. What is the best way to get a proper diagnosis other than CT scan and breathing test? I have no symptoms, no cough, and no problem jogging or walking, but diagnosed with IPF from the CT scan. So one of the ways that a good physician can diagnose it, or at least that something's abnormal, is with a stethoscope. So I don't know if you've heard of what's called Velcro rails. And so when they take a listen to the bases of your lung in the back, what happens, how Velcro, you open it and that sound that it makes, that's called Velcro rails. If they hear that, that's like a suspicious, they should be suspicious and get a CT scan. My recommendation is that you get to one of these PF centers of excellence at least one time just to be seen. There's a lot of research that is going on now in early IPF. Manzarol, where do you live? I'm sorry if I said your name wrong.
Oh, you said it right. Thank you, Dr. Lindell. I live in Houston, Texas. So I'm actually looking at going to Baylor to get a second opinion.
Well, and ironically, at Baylor is the new division chief is Yvonne Rosas, and his area of specialty, he worked with us in Pittsburgh, and then he went to Harvard, and now he's the division chief at Baylor Scott White in Houston. But his area of research is early diagnosis of pulmonary fibrosis, often before people even know that they have it. So he's a good person to go see.
Okay, could you please put the name in the chat box, or could someone do that? I would like to write that down.
Yeah, it's Shelley. I don't know if you can do that. It's Yvonne, Ivan. His last name is Rosas, Rosas.
I put Yvonne's address or email, not his name, I'm sorry, his name. And I've met him, spent time with him, and he is just not just brilliant, but really a good human being.
He is. He's wonderful. I worked with him for years. He's wonderful. So you have good resources near you.
Thank you.
All right, Eunice, regarding bleomycin, there has been some evidence that some patients it can cause scarring. Yes. Okay.
Excuse me, Dr. Lindell. This is
Yes.
Eunice. I was just trying to help answer the questions for you. I'm
Sure.
also a registered nurse with working at UT Southwestern and Baylor here in Dallas as a lung transplant nurse as well. And now I'm in pharmaceutical.
Wonderful.
So I was just trying to help. Sorry.
Oh, no, no. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. Regarding the vaccine, the information you shared stated information about the safety is not available yet. Well, no, actually, if you go to that CDC website, it does talk about it. And here's just something that, this is where I'm pragmatic and practical. You don't want to get COVID. COVID is not good for somebody who has pulmonary fibrosis. The vaccines, you want to increase your chance of not getting it. I can't speak to one vaccine versus the other. I can just endorse that it's really important that you get the vaccine. Shelley, you asked the question, when can we expect to reach herd immunity? So they're saying, they being the CDC, once we get to 70 to 80%, and they're thinking with the way the vaccine rollout now is it's kind of like exponentially increasing, they're hoping by late summer that we should be able to get there. So as I said, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Claire Rooney. Claire, where are you? This is a perfect question.
Right here.
Okay. So how do you explain shortness of breath with exertion without a decline in oxygen saturation? So that's like one of the nuts and bolts of, pulmonary, is that dyspnea, which is shortness of breath, does not equal hypoxemia, which is low oxygen level. So this is really if you're not doing pulmonary rehab, you would be an ideal candidate. If you are doing it, you need to do more. And the reason is because the shortness of breath that you're experiencing, probably what will happen is they will teach you how to control your breathing.
Okay.
Do you do pulmonary rehab?
I walk on a treadmill every day at a rate of 3.5 miles per hour for 30 minutes.
Well, you're
And
doing it.
some days I have a problem with it and some days I don't.
Yeah. Is it, do you ever notice like with weather, with humidity?
Yes, colder weather is definitely a problem. And humidity, I can't say. I don't know if it's affected it or not.
So you bring up another good, this is like pulmonary pearls. So for those of you that live somewhere where it's cold, you may already be doing this, but in case you're not, if you're exposed, you have to go outside to get the mail, or you're going out to the doctor's appointment, or you're going to the store. You know, of course, you're going to have your mask on, which makes this better, but it's important when there's cold, dry air that you cover your mouth with a scarf. And what happens is that helps to warm and humidify the air that as you breathe it in. If you breathe in cold, dry air, what happens is it hits the back of your throat and it almost induces like a spasm in a way. So that's something we've known for years is when you go out and say, oh, I forgot my scarf, then you just take and you cover your nose and your mouth just to warm and humidify that air.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything we as patients can do to encourage pharmaceutical companies to do more research? All right. So, Renee, I think right now, and I'm not 100% sure of the number, but this is the most studies that have been going on. And I want to say there's 30 different studies going on at this time. Bill, you might have a more accurate answer, but there are many studies going on.
There's 27 studies. One just left the field yesterday, which was Galapagos, who I was a huge fan of. And it wasn't a efficacy of the drug; it was a dollars and cents. They just said they were given a flush of cash by Gilead for $5 billion. But Gilead looked at the numbers and the cost of entry to compete against Behringer and Genentech and decided it was a risky investment, so they backed out. But we've got a bunch, particularly the ones I'm excited about are the inhaled drugs, which bypass the liver. I think that's going to really be the big hope we have in the short term. And long term, it all comes down to the genome and genetics. So, but there's hope on the horizon, I think.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Next question. I have 50% lung capacity. When I exercise, I breathe better. How does exercise affect the scarred interstitium? So when you're exercising, you're circulating your blood and your blood's carrying your oxygen and the oxygen is helping. And remember, I know I keep making this sound simplistic, but as long as you're above 89% with or with oxygen, that's what you need to be circulating throughout your body. And so exercise helps to promote the movement of that oxygen. This next question, I have IPF and was diagnosed yesterday with polymyalgia rheumatica, and the doctor put me on long-term prednisone. How can I counteract the damage from the steroids? Steve, where's Steve? Are you here, Steve, still?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. What dose are you on?
Well, he started me on 20 milligrams a day for 2 weeks, and then I dropped to 10, and then I go back in 4 weeks for further. But he said it would probably take 6 months to a year.
Okay. Did he address side effects from steroids?
No.
So you want to specifically ask him that question. Now, for anyone who's on steroids, it's important that, so steroids can, Some people look at them as a wonder drug because they make you feel better, but they do come with their share of side effects. So for example, some people get really hungry and they want to eat, and then they put on some weight and they have some water retention. Some people get heartburn when they're on steroids. One of the things when I was in Philadelphia at Penn, we had a lot of patients on steroids at the time, and we used to counsel them about their bones specifically, because what happens is that they can leach the bones. And so what we recommend, and actually this is good for everyone, and this is under nutrition, is that you make sure that you're getting enough calcium every day and vitamin D, because that promotes bone health. And it's very easy. Just go now you can go on Google and look to see what dose, but typically for women who are postmenopausal, it's 1,500 milligrams a day. And it's more ideal if you get it from food sources, so milk, yogurt, but you have to intake a lot of that. There's orange juice now that has calcium and vitamin D in it. Broccoli, strawberries, like potatoes, they're all sources of calcium, but calcium is really good for your bone health. And my old doctor, who I worked with, the minute he put somebody on a prednisone prescription, he also gave them, a prescription to take calcium and vitamin D to just protect their bone health. Okay, next question. How long after the second COVID shot to take the Prevnar 13 shot? I don't know that answer. I would talk to your doctor and see that. Yeah, I don't know that answer. Looks like I don't see any more questions.
Dr. Lindell, you have been so incredibly generous with your time. And I don't know about everybody else. I took about 2 pages of notes. And on reflection, I have to say this just has to be one of the best meetings we've ever had. It's just great. Really a great meeting, seriously. I want to thank you. I know Shelley's got her speech all prepared, but thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't copy down the email to send you a question. May I ask one over the air?
Absolutely.
I've been on sleep apnea machine for about a week. I'm not yet on oxygen, but I'm wondering in the future, is there a way to combine the oxygen if required?
Yes. Yeah, what they do is they bleed it. They bleed it in through the CPAP. Okay,
thank you very much.
Yes.
Great presentation.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. This is a group that's near and dear to my heart, and you're the basis for why I do what I do.
Okay, Shelley?
Thank you very much, Dr. Lindell. And we hope to get you again. Also for the what we have coming up in March, we believe is going to be a presentation by Dr. Christine Garcia.
Oh, yeah.
She's been doing some research on hormone support to help fight pulmonary fibrosis, and of course, lengthening telomeres to give you better health. So, Bill, do you have anything coming up?
We do. We have one of our members, Dick Morgan, is hosting the next meeting we do on Thursday, the 25th, and he's calling it Coffee and Conversation. It's going to be a very interactive patient-patient, caregiver question and answer discussion system. I'd encourage you, if you can make it, please do. He's got some surprises in his back pocket for you. So,
thank you again, Dr. Lindell.
You're welcome. Everybody take care and be safe, and do know there's light at the end of the tunnel.
All right. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.